What's up, y'all? I've got 3 more RPG horror stories for you, so hold on to your hats because these stories are wild, especially the last one. Let's get right to it. Our first story is from UnassumingAxolotl, and it's called My Friends Brutally Murder Hobo'd My Previous Character After I Re-rolled. Hello, I feel this is slightly unconventional, but I wanted to share my story. I was playing a game of Pathfinder with a group of online friends that I met through League of Legends. We'd been a tight group for a few years at this point, and when someone offered to DM a homebrew campaign, a lot of us jumped at the opportunity, reaching a party of 7 people, though one wouldn't show up again after the first session. No particular person stands out, but the party consisted of a cavalier, fighter, sorcerer, rogue, bard, and myself as a paladin. I've always been told that if I was a class in real life, I'd be a paladin. I put a lot of myself into my character, as I've never roleplayed much, and wanted to ease myself in. Most of the party was chaotic good, myself being chaotic good, and the bard being chaotic neutral. We were informed the setting was an adventurer's guild. We would all be members, and our first job as a group was to investigate a missing gnome wizard, find where he disappeared to, and why. While everything started off great at first, towards the end of the first session is where things went a little wonky. There was a gravedigger or attendant roaming the graveyard. He was there for us to ask some questions, etc. We were looking for a crypt belonging to a certain family, and wow, it was right there in the middle of the graveyard, which the attendant happily pointed us towards. However, when someone suggested we start robbing graves, the innocent guy just doing his job wasn't too happy with that. As a lawful paladin, I didn't want to partake either. I was able to justify breaking into the crypt to investigate the missing gnome wizard NPC. It's actively trying to save someone's life, but I couldn't justify just opening up graves. As the group pinned the gravedigger down and hogtied him so that they could loot to their heart's content, I decided to take a step back and make a different character. This was something I was struggling to be able to condone and didn't want to have to constantly argue with the party about not harming innocents. The session ended after the graves had been dug up and the party had found some relevant information in the main crypt. I spoke with the DM about my concerns and he agreed. He didn't expect the group to be as aggressive to an innocent as that. I re-rolled into a witch with supportive elements so I could become more of a buff/debuffer. Until she had a reason to show up, I continued to roleplay as the paladin at the beginning of the next session. As the party went over their spoils from robbing the graves of innocents, I stated that I wasn't happy about this. I was going to return to the guild and request reassignment. I was not angry or being holier than thou. I just went with my sense of right and wrong since I was basically roleplaying as myself. After a brief moment of silence, the sorcerer announced that he was casting a spell on me. I was a little stunned, but then as the DM and I had agreed I was giving up this character, he allowed it to go through. Suddenly, my paladin was being ganged up on by the party. He was knocked to the ground, beaten, tied up, and executed. In particular, I remember the sorcerer calling my paladin a little before the bard finished him off. I was then bundled into a sarcophagus and they covered the lid. They then asked how much my equipment was worth. I was taken aback. I had only played him for 1 session, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels a connection to their characters. I didn't really have time to process what had just happened as the DM then introduced my new character as walking into the graveyard with someone from the guild, introducing me as an extra pair of hands sent by the guild to help out before leaving immediately. I proceeded to be very quiet through the session, mostly just getting involved in combat. We had a fun moment when I hit a critical strike with my crossbow, but other than that, I remember the session just dragging to me. I even played another session afterwards where I was a bit more playful, but the DM canceled after our 3rd session due to personal reasons. I never spoke to my friends about this. This was almost 4 years ago now, but I still think about it from time to time. I should have said something about how I felt about having my self-insert beaten, murdered, and looted by my friends. As the years have gone by, they've repeatedly done things that just bash at my self-esteem, and I realized recently that they don't have my best interests at heart. If this doesn't come off as too much of a vent/blog post, I've been listening to a lot of D&D horror stories and I just wanted to share mine and get it off my chest. Thank you for reading. Edit. I've come back to read a lot of your responses. I'm very grateful for all of your opinions and the support I've had from some of you. I did want to put in something I forgot to mention, that they did know I had a new character rolled up. I'd brought it up after I spoke to the DM about making a new character that would be more chaotic. What we have here is yet another case of PvP ending in hurt feelings and fun at another player's expense. Seriously, guys, PvP is one of the reddest of flags on TTRPGs. Our next story is from u/atomic, and it's titled DM Bait Switches D&D Night for Board Game Night. First off, I would like to say that I don't have any ill intentions towards DM, as we have been friends for a long time in the event that he reads this. Over the pandemic, I joined a dungeon crawl campaign hosted by someone I used to play in real life with in high school. He hosted board games, Warhammer, MTG, and TTRPGs at his garage every Saturday. The campaign generally progressed well. After a month or so ago, DM indicates to the group that he misses his board games and that his IRL board game group disbanded during the pandemic and for whatever reason did not get back together, leaving him without a current outlet. He asks if people in the D&D campaign are up for trying to play some board games online. Unfortunately, there was not much interest in online board games in the group. Personally, I was never that into board games. Sessions are played once every other week. This week's mission, the party wanders into a hall with a large table in the middle. As soon as we enter, the doors slam shut. After doing some investigation, we find a riddle about a road to victory that will clear the way written on the table. Inside the table, we of course find a board game that is not Catan. We eventually deduced that in order to open the doors, we would need to win the board game using the longest road victory condition. One of the PCs asks if we're doing a gaming set check to see if we can do it and or how long it takes us. DM replies, no, and moves us to a new Roll20 map, where he has basically set up a not Catan board. He tells us we will need to play out the game to pass the puzzle and proceeds to explain Roll20 decks and links us to the not Catan rules. I haven't played Catan in more than a decade and am no longer familiar with the rules. One of the other players has never played, so we have to take an extensive break to go over the rules. I asked him why he thinks we would want to play not Catan when no one was interested in board game night, and if he would reconsider his position on a gaming set check. His position was that this is a legitimate D&D puzzle and shouldn't be bypassable with just a check. He also informs us that he's spent the last 2 weeks prepping a few board games for Roll20 and giving them a fantasy reskin, and that this is all the content he has prepared for the session. At this point, I excuse myself, honestly a bit stunned that he would think this would be appropriate. I understand not wanting to run D&D anymore and or wanting to play board games, but come on. Wow, just wow. Not only am I feeling OP's frustration, but also a bit of pity for the DM. Obviously, he just wants to play board games with his friends, but inserting it into the D&D game is not the way to go about it. The players came to play D&D, not Catan. Wow. Continuing on. This next story is from u/LadyKeelala, and it's called The DM That Almost Made Me Quit D&D. And let me tell you, this one gets a little bit rough at the end. The year was 2010. My boyfriend at the time introduced me to Dungeons & Dragons, and I was instantly hooked. D&D was right up my nerdy girl alley. The chance to step out of reality and into fantasy for a few hours was just the remedy I needed in college. The system I learned to play D&D on was 3.5. Now, many of you know the horrors and insanity of 3.5, but to our group, it was much more enjoyable than Pathfinder or 4th edition. My boyfriend was the DM, and we had 3 other friends from college that played with: Fighter, Ranger, Bard, and I was a Druid. Being a new player, I didn't know any of the red flags were being waved in my face. Of course I know better now, so I was blissfully ignorant to the unfairness the DM displayed. First, he played favorites. Now, he did not play favorites with me, mind you. Actually, he basically ignored my character and never gave her any real roleplay. No, he favored the Fighter and Ranger. He gave them interesting plot developments in their backstories and put them in the spotlight a lot. I was upset, not because he wasn't playing favorites with me, but because I just wanted to feel like part of the group and not just a side character along for the ride. My first character died by falling down a pit trap that you have no chance to save yourself from. I made another character with a rich and fun backstory, a runaway princess who heard the call of a deity and became his paladin. The same stuff continued to happen. The Fighter and the Ranger were placed in the spotlight and my character was just shoved off to the side. We never finished that campaign because of schedule issues that all college kids face. The second campaign I played in, my ex was the DM again. He was the forever DM of the group since a lot of us were newer players. This time we have a new group. I am playing an elf scout. Scout in 3.5 was a mix of ranger and rogue. We also had a rogue, one of my best friends to this day. A cleric, a barbarian, and a bard, the IRL brother of the rogue. The bard, rogue, barbarian, and cleric had just finished a mission for the chief of a nomadic group. This was 10 years ago. I don't remember the details perfectly. The chief is my character's father. They come to the camp and there's a celebration going on. My character is on stage with the band playing her ocarina. The bard is instantly enthralled by her. My scout and his bard instantly hit it off and have a connection. This is where the next red flag popped up that I didn't notice. My ex got instantly upset that our characters were flirting with each other. He did not know how to separate character from player. My character flirted with the bard, but I myself did not flirt with the player. He was the younger brother of my best friend, younger than me, and I was loyal to my then boyfriend at the time. My ex never told me this upset him. He never mentioned it during the game. After the campaign was over, it would be years after we broke up that he brought it up when we were talking about old D&D characters. Here is the lead up to one of the most disheartening things he ever told me. The bard and my scout were both young in elf years. They flirted awkwardly with each other, not sure of the other's feelings. Encouraged by the rogue, his IRL brother, the bard finally told my character that he liked her. She mustered her courage and she said she liked him too. Almost half a year in game time, about a month or two IRL, and our characters finally lose themselves in each other. We are respectful and do not RP this. We have a fade to black moment after a very touching RP session between the two of them where they admit their true feelings and promise themselves to each other. The rest of the table enjoyed it and thought it was great character development from them both. My ex did not. After that one night, he told us that my character is pregnant and that she only has a few months before it is dangerous to travel. She talks it out with the group and they all agree she return to her village to have the child. The bard decides to go with her since they promised to stay together. They say goodbye to their friends and together on horseback return to her village. My ex would tell us a few sessions later after we each brought in a new character that our bard and scout had been ambushed on the road. The bard had had his head cut off in front of my scout before she had been, and then stabbed to death. I and the whole table were visually upset by this. My ex was oblivious to our disgust. Now, to what he told me years later. Me. One of my favorite characters I played besides my paladin was my scout. She was fun. X. Oh yeah, I remember the one who hooked up with Bard and got pregnant. Me. Yep, that one. You know, the way you described their deaths was really gross and you didn't need to tell us. It was meta information that we didn't have. X. Oh, I know, but I was just upset you were flirting with Bard and I figured it would stop you from flirting with other players. My jaw was on the floor after that. I didn't know how to respond other than a very flat and emotionless me. Why didn't you talk to me about this at the time? X. I didn't think it would make a difference. We talked for a few more minutes before I made an excuse to get off the phone. There are many more stories about my ex-BF DM that also made me quit D&D, but those will have to wait till another time. Wow, this one's a doozy. He could have went with the classic rocks fall, you die, but no, he had to go full psycho DM on OP. I'm almost at a loss for words here. He did this to his girlfriend's character instead of just saying he wasn't cool with the in-game romance. Anyways, throw me a like and subscribe. See ya.